Hello, welcome to Glazing with AMACO. This is Kara, and today I'm going to talk about Bisque Fix. This is a product that we make specifically for fixing cracks or broken ware. You never want to have to use any kind of Bisque Fix or any other kind of mending material, but sometimes accidents happen and you may want to fix it. So this is a product that we make here at AMACO, specifically for bisque, but I also use it for greenware. Earlier someone asked if it was available again. We had it on back order. Yes, and this is brand new, fresh, as you can see. When Bisque Fix is brand new, it is a liquid. It can be as thick as a paste. If it gets hard, it cannot be reconstituted. So keep that in mind. Sorry, I'm going to bring my water closer. So an example that I brought in of something that is bisque is a project that one of my children made some years ago and didn't slip and score this one bit very well, so it came off. So I'm going to figure out exactly where it's going to go, right about there. I like to dampen the area that's going to be bisque fixed and make sure that it's nice and clean. And I use either a fettling knife or sometimes I'll use a plastic knife, one of those that you get with your takeaway meals, or you can use a palette knife. I'm going to apply it directly to where I want it to join. Unfortunately, I got a little bit on the edges, and then I take my knife and I put it directly into some water, as you can see. You can't see. So that it doesn't harden. If you let the Bisque Fix harden onto something, it will not come off. You need to take it off immediately. I also have a little pot here that I was going to add in, since my child doesn't really care if I have fun with this, because it was made quite some time ago. So Bisque Fix can act like a ceramic glue. You can use it to fill in, but you'll notice it is pretty thin, so it's not going to fill a lot. I'll set that aside for now. One of the things to keep in mind with Bisque Fix is that it will absolutely change the character of your glaze. So if you have it anywhere that it's visible, like I can see it here, it hasn't hardened yet, I'm going to take a knife and clean it up as much as possible. And I use an X-Acto blade to do it. I can also go back and use some underglaze, paint underglaze over the joined areas or over the entire surface. Make sure it's all out of there. Now as it gets kind of crumbly, you can use it to push into cracks when it's a little bit thicker. So I'm going to let that dry and set it aside, and then once until it's been fired, it's going to be very, very fragile. Once it's fired, it will be extremely hard, but I don't want to handle it. So on this, I have some samples that I prepared. One is a completely poor little horse is just completely apart. And then the other is this, and I have faked a crack at the bottom and a crack here. Now, with green ware, my preferred method is actually to take a little bit of clay, the clay that I'm using. So I crushed up some of my throwing scraps here, and I want the clay as fine as possible. Now, it can be done with some wet clay, but it works better with dry clay. You're not adding any extra water to it. And I'm going to add Bisque Fix. Now, you'll notice I'm using a cup that is disposable because I want to make sure that I can throw it out. Sometimes I'll use a paper plate or, you know, again, a takeaway container. And I add enough to make it into a paste. It might be a little thick. A little bit more Bisque Fix. There we go. So I want it to be a paste. I like roughly half dry clay and half Bisque Fix. And I take that paste and I'll use a knife or a spatula or a palette knife and press it into that crack. Really mash it in. I'm going to get a little bit more. I thought that I'd be able to see questions. Do we have any questions about anything so far? So mashing it right into that crack. Now, as I said, it is going to change the character of the glaze. It will be visible. The Bisque Fix is a very, very, very bright white. And if your clay is not porcelain, maybe even if it is, it's going to show up. I'll put that back in the water so it doesn't get hard. Now you'll notice it's made kind of a crust here. So, that out of the way. So I use the knife to scrape down, and I am scraping some of my dry clay as well. That's okay. Now you definitely want to do this before it gets fired. Once it's fired, it's going to be on there, and nothing but short of a grinder is going to take it off. And even cleaned up, you will see there will be visible a very fine line. So as I said, it can be covered up by using an underglaze if you want to use underglaze on the piece. It will affect the appearance of a glaze, and depending on your glaze, it will probably show through. But since it does flux a little bit, it may make your glaze change color. So if you don't use an underglaze, be prepared for it to show up. There we go. So nice and clean. You can barely see it. I can sponge over that. Oh, see? Now I can see more that I didn't clean off. It's very bright white. You should be careful not to inhale any of the dust. Try to keep your dust to a minimum. Maybe do it outside or while wearing a mask. There's one advantage of everyone wearing masks these days. So there's my cup. Set that aside. So I have my paste. Now with this piece, it has completely come apart. So I'm going to try to put this back together again. It's a little horse, a little squishy horse, just made with a little ball of clay. And it got dropped, so you see how I put the paste in there and then just mashed it together. Let's find which leg goes where. Is the camera not in focus? Is that the problem? Or am I just getting out of frame? There we go. Lauren Heron asked about cracked handles, and I am leery of using any kind of patching material like Bisque Fix on a handle, just because the join will not be quite as strong as the original clay would have been. It is quite strong, but I'm always a little concerned about where a repair happened. There we go. So, especially handles, because you're putting a lot of pressure and weight on a handle. Holding, oftentimes if it's like a mug handle, you're holding something with hot liquid, and you're hoping that it's going to keep supporting that weight. So I'm a little nervous about the idea of, oh, the head doesn't quite fit back on. So I guess we'll have a faceless horse, but you can see it kind of went back together again. So that's how I use it for greenware. And of course, cleaning up. You can use a wet sponge too. I'm just going to gently clean off the lumps left from mashing it together. You see how it gets quite hard quickly. As soon as it dries, it's quite firm. And I can go back and use an underglaze to cover up any lines. Especially with something like this, that's a better choice because this is so small. And it stands up just fine. Okay, I'll make sure to stay in frame. So handles, you can use it for something like handles. The last thing I wanted to talk about with it before I show you a piece that's been mended with Bisque Fix is with storing. At the moment it's quite liquid, so I'm not going to do this, but what we recommend is when is to take some water, preferably distilled, and pour it on top of your Bisque Fix. Now it should be kind of like a consistency, like a thin paste. This is a little bit more liquid. So you pour water on top, Don't shake it up. Just pour the water on top and then put the lid on very, very tightly. Some people like to put a little piece of saran wrap over it. Tighten it up, because exposure to air is what's going to dry out your bisque fix. And also you will notice our new label says to keep from freezing, and that is very, very, very important. If your bisque fix freezes, it cannot be reconstituted. Once bisque fix hardens, it cannot be reconstituted. So there you go. What I am going to show you is a piece that at the beginning you saw this. This is our 11M clay AMACO, and it's glazed with PC71 flambe, and I applied dots of TH1, the high fire texturizer, on the inside. When this was bisque, I made the mistake of picking it up by the edge and snapped off one of these sections. So I used Bisque Fix to join it there and there, and if you look closely you can see the white here, here, here. It's not super noticeable, but there is some white spots where I didn't cover over the texturizer. I didn't use underglaze over it. I probably should have. So it is visible. It didn't really change the character of the glaze, but you can see where the glaze broke. It shows the little white spots of the Bisque Fix, and then there's a little spot where I didn't fill in very well, and you can see the crack. But it is quite strong. I'm not going to make the mistake of lifting it by that edge again. But in testing a lot of different patching, joining materials that are made by other manufacturers, as well as the AMACO product, I really, really love how you can use Bisque Fix for a variety of purposes. And it can be used at both greenware stage as well as bisque. And it just gives an incredibly strong attachment. I would always be leery of using it for handles, but other than that, I've used it on a variety of things, and I have not been disappointed with it so far. If you're debating whether you should fix a piece or you should try to mend it, it's really your decision as to how much time and energy you want to invest in a piece. And if it's worth it to you to do the mending, then do the mending. And Bisque Fix is a great option. And yes, Debbie, Bisque Fix can be fired at cone 6. In fact, this was fired to cone 6. You can see here, 11M flambe, cone 6 with texturizer 1, TH1. So yes, it goes to cone 6. As far as I know, it goes to cone 10. So I haven't had any issues with using it at any temperature. It works at 06, it works at cone 6. And if you have any other questions for me today about Bisque Fix, please just drop them in the comments and I will answer them offline. And I hope that this helps if you have issues or have questions about using it. Someone was asking if Bisque Fix is now available, and yes, it is back in production again after being back ordered for a couple of months. So thanks for joining me today, and we will see you again next week. Next week, I think we're going to be talking about some of the new Potter's Choice glazes. So I hope to see you then.